Nicole and Briana are lined up on the grid. It's lights out, and away we go. This week's Grid Walk.
Speaking of exciting races, another unpopular opinion that we tend to have is that overtakes don't necessarily make for an exciting race. Great stories do. Like, as long as you're telling a good story, whether or not the overtake happens, it doesn't matter. And I actually think this leads into like this overall desire in F1 for like constant parity. And like, oh, all the teams need to be fighting all the time. And the reality is that's just not what F1 is. And I thought we got interesting quotes from ESPN's director of programming last week, right before the Monaco GP. He was asked about whether or not ESPN would want to see more parity and competitiveness in F1 races. I thought his quote was really interesting and worth discussing. So he said, the best laid plans are best laid plans, but at the end of the day, we can't control the competition. That goes for all sports. Look at the NBA finals and the Lakers not getting through there. Boo. We can't control that. So we just have to take the results and try to tell the stories that do exist. Would we want this year to be more competitive? Absolutely. We would say that parity is typically good because it creates drama. But again, I'd be lying if I didn't say we would want to see drama play out over the next couple of weeks as the season continues to progress. So I thought this was a great quote because it seems to be acknowledging that ESPN understands the nature of all sports. And I would hope so because they're a sports network. This is their thing. But I think sometimes living and breathing in the F1 world, and people get really caught up in it being this weird F1 anomaly to have eras of dominance. But what makes great sports are stories, and dominance actually creates good stories. And we don't want to see that thrown away just for a show. I actually think, this is what I'll throw to I'm going to give a hot take here, Nicole, and I'll throw it over to you. I think the reliance on F1, like F1's reliance on needing parity at the front to make F1 exciting is just lazy. It just means they don't want to do the work to talk about or create other storylines other than who's going to win the championship. And that's why we do the yellow sector notes at the end of every show, because there's interesting stories going on up and down the grid. They need to learn how to talk and create storylines about things other than the championship.
Yeah, it feels like a really silly question, but I guess depending, to ask the ESPN director of programming of like, hey, do you wish insert any athletic event here was more competitive? Well, yeah, that would have need more views and things, but I so 1000% agree on this pointing at F1 and oh my God, we need to have so much more of a fight, at the front. I'm like, there is so many other things happening in the grid, whether it comes to drivers' individual stories or teams and their upgrades and just all of the other things. It's not all about Red Bull running away in the front right now. And that goes across all sports. I root for teams that don't do well. And there's a lot of commentary on those teams not doing well. Therefore, you can't tell me that you can't be talking about other teams along the grid in F1, or that F1 is this magical exception to this rule, that it just needs to only be about the fight for who's ever winning in the front. It is so lazy. I think it's a fear of maybe people won't well, why are they talking about Haas or why are they talking about Williams? And I think that's dumb and silly because you have fans for all of these teams all around the globe. And if you want fans to be involved and enjoy races more, talk about more teams on the grid about what's happening. And then also maybe your viewership on races will be higher because it's more interesting. But
yeah, I find it fascinating because F1 is the only sport I've ever followed that talks about this and thinks about this at such a global scale. So I'm going to use the NFL because it's, I think, this other sport that we follow the most. And I will talk about how I want the Eagles to be more competitive all the time. That is a frequent topic of conversation. Why, if the Eagles aren't good, I'm asking, why are they not good? But if when the Patriots had their run of winning, I would talk a lot about how I, as an Eagles fan, was not a fan of that era. But I didn't do a lot of like, there's something wrong with the NFL. Because to me, the beauty of sports is that if someone gets it right, they get it right. Like, that feels really good when your team gets it right and is really good. And it also, some of the beauty of sports is when your team is not good and they get it wrong and you're frustrated. And something about F1, like, they're always talking about manufacturing in this parity that I've just yet to see a single league actually figure out. Like, is there a sport in the world that has true parity? And would we actually even want that?
No, I don't think there is. And yeah, to your point, like, this isn't the first time in sports that we've seen some kind of like dynasty of things, and people love those stories. I mean, like, gosh, how many people absorbed The Last Dance during like quarantine because it's like that Michael Jordan story, and it's like the, you know, we love teams that can be so unbeatable, and one day I'm sure there'll be like a really wonderful documentary about Red Bull's dominance that probably doesn't talk too much about the cost cap. Like, it's, you know, like
or if they wanted to make it interesting, do talk about the cost cap. Yeah, we love a David and Goliath story, and there needs to be a Goliath for David to take down. Like, for example, I talked about the Patriots winning in the NFL. It was the Patriots and it was Tom Brady. And didn't it feel great when the Eagles beat them? Universally, everyone rejoiced because the Eagles beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. But it would have felt great for Philly to win that. But why it felt great to all NFL fans who weren't Patriots fans is because it was the David taking down Goliath story. Like, I don't know.
words.
Yeah. Words. I couldn't come up with a good conclusion, but
no, F1's just no exception to this rule.
Right.
And everyone will continue to say it. And I doubt we are the first to, but no. F1 is no exception to every other sport, and every other sport goes through its periods where there is some kind of like dynasty, or there's some kind of like Goliath of a winner, and then like when eventually that Goliath falls, because that's just like the cycle of sports, whether an athlete leaves or staff changes or something, like something always happens because that's just how sports work, and it'll eventually happen. And will I enjoy to watch that Goliath fall? You best believe it, but it's not going to make me stop watching F1 until it happens.
No, the funny thing I'm realizing in looking at our show outline right now was that we brought up this quote from ESPN to talk about briefly and transition to something more Monaco GP related. But I just always forget how passionate we both are about this subject, and we can't bring it up without like giving an entire dissertation about.
Thank you so much for listening to this segment from episode 19 of Gridwalk. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more F1 videos while you're here. And you made it this far in this video. Why not watch the rest of the podcast? You can watch the full thing. Click right here. Ready? Click, 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 click.